What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. DJ Reacts. Got a lot of great videos, a lot of great stuff going on, so let's get into this content.
You are our perfect invaders, the perfect virus. You wiped out the original population, making room for us. Look at how alike we are. Two races from different solar systems can't be this similar. We have the same DNA.
So, we... are you?
God created man in his own image. But to be specific, you're the product of our genetic engineering. You're a truncated version of us. We took away your psionic abilities. We gave you your drive to mate, which awoke your primal instincts. Combined with your emotions and mortality, this results in your need to procreate thoughtlessly and vigorously. This way, the virus spread faster. As a result, you completed the mission thousands of years sooner than expected. You lack mercy and compassion. You're driven solely by procreation and violence.
There are vortex canals beneath classified layers of the ocean, and the concept of the ocean floor itself is merely an illusion. Upon reaching one of these vortex canals in a hypothetical submersible that could withstand it, the laws of gravity as we know them no longer apply. As you are sucked into the depths of this canal, directions become inapplicable. Up becomes down, down becomes up. By the time you make it through and back up to the surface, you are misled by the familiarity of what's around you, only to realize once you get to the shore, you're in a completely alien world, and that the waters behold the mysterious phenomena that you once associated with the concept of outer space.
You call me a reptilian alien, but how can I be if we evolved on Earth? You see, this was never your planet. Our ancestors were the dinosaurs, and what you believe was an asteroid impact that wiped out 70% of life wasn't a natural disaster. It was an ancient war between two extraterrestrial races fighting over Earth's resources. My ancestors survived alongside of yours, but mine were already walking on 2 feet while yours were still swinging in the trees. Through millions of years of slow and natural evolution, we advanced enough to genetically alter our own DNA, giving ourselves a more humanoid appearance. Eventually, a humanoid alien species came to Earth and used your ape ancestors as a science experiment, accelerating your evolution with their own DNA. That's how your race was able to evolve in such a short amount of time. Your creators programmed you to hate our kind, fear us as demons and your Christian religions. But the ancients used to worship us.
UFOs are real and aliens are real, but they're not from outer space. And that's according to the top 2 UFO researchers after decades-long research. So go to Sabrel.com and
So where do they
it's
think
up
they're
there
from
in time.
if they're not from outer space?
They're interdimensional and potentially fallen angels, disguising themselves because they're liars of something, like you said, can't be proven or disproven. I'm from this galaxy 300 light years away.
This is kind of what Tucker Carlson thinks. He thinks there's a spiritual element to it, and he thinks they've always been here, and he thinks that this is what's kind of documented in the Bible as like good and evil. And
That's it, exactly. I mean, that's what's going on. I mean, the top 2 UFO researchers said UFOs are real, number 1. Number 2, they're not from outer space. And number 3, they're demonic. And that's what I talk about, where it talks about fallen angels interbreeding with humans. It's talked about in Genesis 6, and creating a race called Nephilim, who were men of renown, world leaders.
They told us that we are never, ever to fly over that hole, and we are never to discuss it again. What is that about? And does that have anything to do with all these other pieces that keep emerging? That there might be something archaeological in Antarctica?
According to ancient astronaut theorists, this was not the first time a massive hole has been spotted in the ice of Antarctica. famous polar explorer Admiral Richard Byrd allegedly reported seeing a massive entrance to an underground world during his 1947 expedition to the South Pole.
Admiral Byrd made a lot of unusual statements, allegedly talking about a large opening at the South Pole that went deep inside the Earth, ice-free, and was inhabited by various sorts of...
I'm not sure if any of you remember, but back when Google was first mapping the Earth, you could actually see that hole on Google Images. It was there for a long time until people started to talk about it. And so then they just blotched it out to make it look like the rest of the ice, but you could still see the pixelation marks where that hole is.
Mr. Elizondo, you state in your testimony that, quote, advanced technologies not by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe, end quote. If these technologies are not made by any government, who's making them? Private companies, or are you implying they are crafted by a non-human intelligence?
Well, ma'am, that's precisely why we're here. The problem is that, temporally speaking, over decades, not just the last 10 years, to put this in perspective,
are these private companies you're implying, or is this non-human intelligence?
It may be both.
How would you characterize UAPs?
An enigma, sir, and a frustration. We're talking about technologies that can outperform anything we have in our inventory. And if this was an adversarial technology, this would be an intelligence failure eclipsing that of 9/11 by an order of magnitude.
I'm going to play a bit more of this kind of stuff, but I want everyone watching to understand this is a dog and pony show. Yeah, it's great that it's happening. I don't know if any of you watched this live when it was going on, but nobody was even fazed by what they're saying. This is a dog and pony show. This has to happen. They know what questions are going to be asked. They know what questions can't be answered, and all of this is scripted. It's a complete dog and pony show just to let people know that, hey, the discussion has come up to the congressional hearing level, and we're having those discussions. But never think for one moment that this isn't scripted and that both sides don't know what's going on. They know exactly what questions they can ask and answer. It's just like when you see celebs get interviewed on, on the old Tonight shows, on the old talk shows of the nights. They know what they're going to be asked, because certain celebrities have certain topics. They're like, stay away from my wife, don't talk about my wife or my daughter, blah, blah, blah. Same thing here. They know what they can and can't ask or answer, but they're showing it off so that they're showing the people that the discussion is finally being had, which it is a good thing. But what I want to really point your attention to is there's a 64-page Disclosure Act. It's a bill that's come out. This right here is a part of that bill. There's a 7-year process that this disclosure is going to happen. So all of this you're seeing right now is the very beginning of that 64-page bill. And that process is going to span 7 years. So you're going to see stuff like this over the next 7 years. It's going to increase a little bit, like just a fraction. It's going to increase very small by very small increments over those 7 years. It's not like they're going to have this, congressional hearing, and then a year from now, they're going to be talking about, actual alien cloning, DNA, reptilian, all of this stuff. It's not going to happen like that, but there is a plan. All of this was put into place before these hearings ever even happened. So, and I might link that bill, or I might just do a video on it. I'm not sure yet, because it's interesting to me, but it's really boring. If you're just sitting there reading it, it's pretty boring, but it's still really interesting to me, I thought. But I don't know if it would make a good video. It would probably put you to sleep. It's like reading an IT white paper. It's just all the little things that most people don't want to know, but I do. But I just wanted to put that out there so you understand what you're looking at. You're looking at a scripted dog and pony show, and there's a bill, there's an act to support everything that they're doing, and it's going to span over the next 7 years, and it's going to increase in dictionary terms incrementally, you know, and they're going to make new ones as well. So just want.
And after a very brief conversation, he looked at me and he said, I want to ask you a question. Okay, sir. And he said, what do you think about UFOs? I said, well, I answered truthfully. I said, I don't. And he said, well, what do you mean? You don't believe in them? And I said, no, that's not what I said. You asked me if I think, what do I think about UFOs? And frankly, I don't think about UFOs. I really don't have the luxury to think about them. I'm too busy, working intelligence operations and whatnot. And I remember him looking over his glasses and very seriously staring me straight in the eye and says, well, don't let your personal bias get the best of you, because what you may learn may surprise you and may challenge any preconceived notion of what you think something is or is not.
Luis Elizondo, a former Pentagon insider and well-known whistleblower, recently unveiled something extraordinary to a private audience. A photograph he claims shows a floating mini-city in the sky, a vast structure he describes as an alien mothership. Elizondo, famous for his work on the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, has spent years unearthing military secrets about unidentified aerial phenomena. This recent image, taken over Romania, reveals a sprawling, otherworldly structure seemingly suspended mid-air, a vision so astounding that he hasn't yet gone fully public with it. According to the Scottish Sun, Elizondo presented the photograph privately in Philadelphia on October 28, 2024, where it generated significant intrigue and skepticism alike. Believers see this as undeniable evidence of advanced extraterrestrial technology, while skeptics argue it could simply be a mirage or an unusual reflection. But Elizondo's reputation and deep knowledge of UAPs lend powerful weight to this vision of the unknown. Is it a mothership or just another illusion?
They tried to keep it hidden, but 8 days ago, the truth broke free. Congress heard it. Undeniable proof. We are not alone.
To hide the fact that we are not alone in the cosmos.
Intelligence officers claimed the Pentagon has been hiding knowledge of alien activity for decades. One of these figures, Luis Elizondo, a former U.S. Army counterintelligence officer and Pentagon insider, claimed last week, on November 14, 2024, that the government is concealing proof of extraterrestrials.
Has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes.
Were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
Yes. Let me be clear. UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe.
Bound by non-disclosure agreements, he revealed that he can only share critical details with Congress behind closed doors. Recovered crafts, non-human intelligence. The evidence is real. What happens next changes everything.
Now remember, so all of this is real, but remember, this is a dog and pony show. And the clip that you saw of the craft, that ultra famous clip, that is like this stuff right here. So these are just what they're allowed to release. They have, people always say, well, why isn't there, absolutely clear photos? Obviously there is. We have satellites up there. We have the best resolution you could possibly imagine. That stuff is classified, so they're not going to release those photos or videos, but they are crystal clear, absolute crisp. That's why you primarily see this one that they're showing. The rest of them it's going to be classified because the devices, the surveillance devices that they came from, see this one right here. So they're showing this one a lot, and that's not a new one. That's an older, much older video. And I think those were taken by F-16s, if I'm not mistaken. They were chasing them. But they don't release that classified material because they don't want the U.S.'s opposition to know which devices they have to be able to take such clear and crisp photos and video. People are always asking, well, why don't they show the clear ones? That's why. They don't want everybody knowing what they've got up there. So there's your answer.
Were you worried about what you were going to say today?
Yeah, absolutely. But I got to say, Chris, I think this was really a historic day for both Congress and for the American people. I think it was a win-win. This is now the second hearing on this topic that's been open to the public. And hopefully the public is now getting an understanding of how long our government has actually been involved in this topic despite decades of denial. I think it's important to know that we have absolutely been able to confirm the existence of some sort of technology that has the ability to operate with anonymity within our controlled U.S. airspace, operate over our sensitive military installations, and possibly interfere with our nuclear equities. Now, if that's not a national security concern, I don't know what is. There's no way around it. There's no shortcut.
Wow. The word imminent, you know, you write, actually in the foreword of the book, you say, this is not meant that there's, you know, some sort of imminent threat necessarily. But I'm not gonna lie, when I spend time with you, we've spent a decent amount of time together, I get the sense that you're sitting on things that feel like very hard truths. It feels like your existence, like you want to say more. And you feel like you're holding it together, and that's a tough spot to be in. And so, to the extent you can talk about what might be imminent, what is imminent?
Time is not a luxury that we can afford. The time has come. We need to start having the conversation collectively. We should have had it a while ago, but we really need to. We really need to start having a conversation.
I can't think of a better note to end on.
Awesome, guys. It's been an honor and privilege.
It's been an absolute honor.
So what do you guys think he's talking about? Let me know in the comments. He's always holding back because he has so much information. He works in intelligence. So ever worked government like I have, had a security clearance, you know, certain things are sensitive, other things are classified, what you can and can't say. But let me know what you think he's talking about. When he's talking about, obviously time is a luxury no one has, not an abundance of time. That's the one commodity that not purchase more of, except for the adrenochrome, reptilian, Satan ritual abusers. That's literally what they're doing. They're buying their youth with the way they're trafficking children and to them. So they're buying their time. What do you think he's talking about? Let me know in the comments.
And they're dangerous for several reasons, because if they're lying to you about, and I think we need to be very, very mindful of that. They're very dangerous. And they're dangerous for several reasons, because if they're lying to you about that, they're probably lying to you about other things in their life, their past life and their current life, which may or may not come to light at some point. These are people who have taken advantage of people for a very long time. And, you know, you have to be, you know, you have to be careful, you know.
What else are the motivations of some of these charlatans, or potentially could be their motivation, other than financial?
Well, look at any religious
influence?
charlatan. It's the same thing. It's a cult of personality. It's somebody who, for whatever reason, thinks it's all about them, and they manage the narrative. It goes to the basic core of pride and ego in human beings, and narcissistic behavior. You know, real, true, deep psychological issues. Some sociopathic, to be honest with you.
Is there any gold in that rubble?
I'm sorry?
Is there any gold in that rubble? As in, is all of what they're saying, some of these charlatans, we don't have to name names?
No, I think there's always fibers of truth in a blanket of lies, because that's what holds it together. There are some aspects of truth. The problem is when you take that truth and you distort it, you know.
there's people in history that were very good at convincing large amounts of people that they have the answer, right? I don't need to go back into history to say which ones those are, but you have characters like Jim Jones. Heaven's Gate is an example. Even Hitler to some degree, where they were very charismatic people who got people in this web, and they didn't realize it until it was too late. And I just think when you're creating all these shell organizations and pass-throughs and paying people off to do things for you to deceive other people, I think is problematic. Again, I'm not going to mention names. I think most people are smart enough to see through it. My concern are those people who are already sucked into it. It becomes a cult and it becomes brainwashing and manipulation, and that's my concern, because it gives a terrible name to the effort and making false accusations. I think is there's an old saying, and let's see if I can remember it, that ye be careful of the knife ye uses to stabbeth the back of others, for surely that knife will be used against you in the future or at some point. So, anyway, being just, right, karma is a bitch. Be careful. Mother Nature has a vote. She's got a way of always squaring things up at the end. And, that's what I've seen anyways.
Remember earlier I was asking you, what can we do as a culture? I think based on some of your statements, what we can do is something like we've already been doing, which is keep talking about it so that we can destigmatize it. I know that I don't particularly like the word destigmatization. I think it's been taken by certain people, but essentially to destigmatize. However, there does seem to be the tendency from those who are believers in, or who are part of the UFO community, who deride people like, see, Neil deGrasse Tyson and other skeptics deride the UFO community. And I don't think they should do that. But then I also don't think that they should be met with condescension as well, because I think that comes back at you. I think that love and extending an arm and an olive branch is what will.
Kurt, you're right. You're absolutely right. Let me, if I may, that's a good point. Let me talk a little bit about Mr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. First of all, he's one of the few shows that I used to watch a lot. I loved his perspective. And let's talk about his background. This is a person who was a bit of a maverick. He cut his teeth and really made his bones by supporting and defending a theory that really was a hypothesis at the time, an outlandish hypothesis. And that was, there were these supermassive objects in our universe that were so dense that they created a gravity well. They created a black hole in space-time where light itself couldn't even escape. And although we can't see it directly, we can't prove its existence, we think they're there, right? Now, a lot of the scientific community said that's hogwash. It's a theoretical anomaly that isn't real. And yet Neil deGrasse Tyson did exactly that. He supported the hypothesis and the theory that there are these things you'll never be able to see with the naked eye, but they fundamentally, they're there, and they're hundreds of millions of light years away. Well, it's funny because that same spirit used to prove something you can never see that is there, for some reason, he seems to have forgotten that in this topic, because we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about something that is hard to see directly sometimes, but we can see its impact on the environment around it, and to some degree, maybe warping space time. But it's not hundreds of millions of miles away. It's right here, and I don't understand how you can support, on one hand, the scientific study and research into something called a black hole, and not be open-minded to something like UAP.
And I said, okay, sir, so it's ours? And he said, no, that's not what I'm saying. And he said, he asked me point blank, have you read your Bible lately? And I wasn't quite sure where he was going with that. And I said, well, sir, I think I know what it says. Where are you going with this?
And he said, well, then you would know that these things are demonic and we should not be pursuing them.
That's an interesting standpoint that he takes right there. I've heard that before. I've heard people say that they're demonic, but they don't want you to believe that they're demonic, because if you believe that they're demonic, then you have to believe God, and they don't want that. So they want you to think alien. Everything else other than demonic. That's just what I've heard. That's just one perspective out of many that I've heard. Let me know if you've heard that or what you think about it.
Here in Huntsville, Alabama, we had some helicopters that we were testing, and test pilots all reported UAP coming around their helicopters while they were testing them. And one even reported that he believed his helicopter was disabled.
I was reading about this really interesting incident called the Colares incident. Colares, which was in 1977 to 1978. And it sounded like a UAP incident that was witnessed by thousands of people.
It was investigated officially by the Brazilian military under the command and control of a four-star general named General Uchoa. He has explained before he passed away that even his own military personnel had been attacked by UAP.
What did they document?
A whole litany of things. A lot of the locals call being terrified by these things being pursued by them, almost being like a laser blast, if you can imagine that, or directed energy type injury. Very provocative. Some of the military personnel were injured as well. A lot of medical doctors came in afterwards to look at the locals and the military personnel, validating the presumption that there was some sort of directed energy type damage, tissue damage to some of these people. And of course, then the fear kind of escalated into some of the other local lore of some other things, but it was very well established by the Brazilian military, who also witnessed these encounters. So it's not like just some people in a remote village. And I've spoken to dozens and dozens of military officers all throughout Latin America and in Chile and Peru and Uruguay. And, they all reporting, in some cases, some very, very similar encounters, not necessarily with Colares, but innocent amongst themselves. People who don't even know each other, separated by different countries, are telling me their same encounter. And the same morphology of craft, and how they would in some cases even try to engage in a dogfight and use cannons, conventional guns, to no avail, of course. And there's reports of that in Tehran incident, I believe it's 1978, the Tehran incident with an F-14 Tomcat, where the pilot, his aircraft was disabled every time he tried to engage a target. And then, I superimpose that with, here in Huntsville, Alabama, we had some helicopters that we were testing, and test pilots all reported UAP coming around their helicopters while they were testing them. And one even reported that he believed his helicopter was disabled, and he went into an emergency situation. I think it was an emergency auto rotation situation. And as soon as the UAP left, he was able to regain control of his helicopter.
Why is the Pentagon teasing us? Why do they tell you? Why are they allowing you to say we are in possession of something that was not made by human beings, but not allowed to elaborate, not allowed to show these very compelling videos that you're talking about that you've seen?
I don't. Well, two reasons. I don't think they have a choice. I think with now the introduction of cell phones and Ring cameras, the cat's out of the bag. It's the worst kept secret at this point. Two, there is a faction, unlike before in the Cold War, I believe there is a faction of people inside the government that do want this conversation to occur. But equally, there's still a faction of people that are very mad with me. They do not want me having this conversation. And mark my words, just by me being on your show, it is going to cause an absolute storm inside the Pentagon, and I am sure the other shoe is going to drop. I promise you, you're going to hear all sorts of stuff. People make stuff up about me, trying to discredit this topic, because as many people are in the government that want this topic to be discussed now, there's still some people that do not want this conversation.
Could you steelman their position?
Say again?
Steelman their position, meaning could you argue it from their perspective?
Absolutely.
Like why?
Sure.
What would be a good reason to keep this stuff quiet?
Sure. And I want to preface here, I'm not fear mongering.
No, I don't think you are.
Look, if I was a military person, right, I would look at this from the perspective of there's three options. They're good, they're neutral, or they're bad. So let's go down this road for a second. Let's say they're good, right? Well, we got nothing to worry about. The problem is there's nothing to suggest that they truly are benevolent. People say, well, they're like, they don't want us to nuke ourselves. Well, I discuss it in what I wrote, that there's no
there's no data to suggest that. They didn't stop us from dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and vaporizing 500,000 living souls. They didn't stop us when we started developing nuclear weapons from the atomic age. They didn't stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons. They didn't stop the testing in the Nevada range of atomic and nuclear weapons. And now, how many countries have atomic weapons and nuclear weapons? A lot, right? They didn't stop Chernobyl. They didn't stop Fukushima. They didn't stop 3 Mile Island. So to say that they're here to help us, I'm not sure there's data. People say, well, in Minot and North Dakota and Montana, the UFOs came in and they interfered with our nuclear weapons and they brought the entire Echo flight offline. Which, by the way, I have the government report on that if you want it. But in Russia, a lot of people don't know, they turned them on. Right? So that's equally scary. They're interfering with our nuclear capability, whether to attack or to defend ourselves.
So when you say they turned them on in Russia, this is a Russian report?
Yeah. So this is I don't know if you remember the congressional hearing that occurred last year where
With David Grush?
Nope, the other one, with Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, Ronald Moultrie, and some people from the Navy. And I think it was Congressman Gallagher that asked the very specific question. And he said, are you aware of UFOs interfering with our nuclear capabilities? And the response was something like, no, I'm not really familiar with it, never heard of it. And then the question was, I think, re-asked specifically at these locations. And the government's response was, no, not familiar with it. Well, here's the actual report from the Department of Defense. This is the actual intelligence report that was released through FOIA. There's a gentleman out there who runs a site called the Black Vault. His name is John Greenwald. He's probably the world authority on Freedom of Information Act, and he has a wealth of data that is available to the public that he has received from the government. This is one of those documents. This is the document that our own government has no idea apparently exists.
I like how they write it in all caps.
Yeah, that's the old reporting.
So obviously there's some people that don't want this to be released, and obviously there's some people that think that the general public has a right to know.
I believe so. That's been my observations and my experience.
Well, that makes
the website he's talking about, it's theblackvault.com. It's a great website. If I can remember, I'll link it in the description. But yeah, the guy that runs that is amazing when it comes to FOIA request, documentation. People just don't take the time to read or to check this stuff out. You can go to CIA.gov and read a lot of their declassified material, Freedom of Information request, FOIAs. That's all available. But the blackvault.com is a very good website. I would highly suggest checking that out.
Lou Elizondo. Is he one of them?
Oh, of course. I mean, as soon as he emerged on the stage, I had a very senior guy at CIA who's worked this issue since 1979 contact me about that problem. But remember, the only way that you can control at this point all this coming out because of what we have and what we're pushing forward through media is to control the narrative, the spin. So the people coming forward who get an all-access pass on to, say, 60 Minutes or something like that, or people cleared by this same illegal, corrupt organization because they'll tell the public, yes, the UAPs are real, but we don't know what they are. Well, this is an absolute lie. We absolutely know what they are. Some of them are ours, man-made, and are confused quite frequently with the others, which are of extraterrestrial origin. Those operatives are taught very well to take an issue, grab it, capture it, and then spin it in the direction that they want.
Have you been able to actually see this evidence with your own eyes, the actual physical evidence?
Yeah, I actually gave a briefing to a senior member of the Department of Defense in 2017, several briefings, about the material that I personally have held in my hand. I have held it in my hand, and so have other individuals and I'm not going to say who they were, that worked for very, very high-end aerospace companies, best of the best, and they're looking at this from an engineering perspective, and they're scratching their head. They're saying, I can see it, I believe it, but I can't believe this material was found back then, and under those circumstances, this material, we did not have the engineering capability. It isn't an engineered piece of material. It's layered. It was studied by NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It's been studied by other organizations as well. And of course, that's really the gold standard, isn't it? When you have material that you can analyze and you can look at that material and succinctly say, yeah, this material is very special and it requires an X degree amount of technology to manufacture or reproduce. And frankly, it did not exist at the time the material was found, at least not with us, with humans.
That we have possession of bodies?
Yes.
We have is it multiple types of creatures or?
Sir, I couldn't answer that. I can tell you anecdotally that it was discussed quite a bit when I was at the Pentagon. The problem is the supposed collection of these biological samples occurred before my time, in fact, before I was even born.
And was this part of the Lockheed Martin discussion, or was this the biologist is a completely separate?
Separate yet related.
Okay. Has anyone made contact?
Sir, I'm sorry, could you specify?
Has there been any, to your knowledge, any communication with a non-human life form?
So the term communication is a bit of a trick word because there's verbal communication like we're having now. The problem is you also have nonverbal communication. And so I would say definitively yes, but from a nonverbal meaning, when a Russian reconnaissance aircraft comes into U.S. airspace, we scramble 2 F-22s, and we are certainly communicating intent and capability. I think the same goes with this. We have these things that are being observed over controlled U.S. airspace. And they're not really doing a good job hiding themselves. They're making it pretty obvious they have the ability to even interfere with our nuclear equities and our nuclear readiness.
Is the United States government and our contractors, are they pulling technology from this? Or they're reverse engineering this?
Sir, as I previously stated, and please forgive me, I am not authorized to discuss specifics about crash retrievals. I signed documentation with the U.S. government. What I can say was, after a very thorough review process by the Pentagon, what I wrote about. And that was my limit, unfortunately, that I was given.
That was absolutely useless. But I'm wondering if he's just trying to sell his book, because he did come out with a book that I've read. And I'm wondering if he's trying to sell his book. Because I know he's got DOPSR clearance. So DOPSR is when you have a secret clearance. DOPSR is it's an authority that mandates publications and reviews, and that's who he would have had to go through in order to be able to say any of the stuff that he's saying, as to go through that. That's the funny thing about whistleblowing. The only 2 avenues that you have if you want to become a whistleblower are both going back through your own government. That's why people go to like Julian Assange and all of these other sources to hide themselves and to release information, because in the U.S., when you're part of the U.S. government, your only 2 avenues are both U.S. government to whistleblow. So it's a bad idea, aside from him. So him having that DOPSR clearance and them telling him what he's allowed to talk about and allowing him to come out and say all of this stuff, but still, he can only say very little. It's just, and then having a book at the same time that all of this starts, it's, I don't know. Let me know what you think. I'm still chewing on it a bit, personally, but yeah, it's definitely interesting, but it also makes me think about his intent for a lot of this. Is this just his book? He wouldn't be on Joe Rogan and on all these podcasts if it weren't about his book, because the Pentagon didn't say, hey, go on Rogan. They would have said, definitely do not go on Joe Rogan or any podcast. Say this in a congressional hearing where it's scripted. We know what they're going to ask and what you're going to say. Other than that, don't do anything else. But because he has a book out, been all over the place.
This is the video that would shock the world and change it.
2004 November, the USS Nimitz carrier strike group were doing what they call workups off the coast of San Diego.
And as they are doing this, there are two different radar arrays that are picking up these objects over the course of several days, dropping from 80,000 feet and within about a second or less, all of a sudden being 50 feet over the water and hovering and then popping back up again. So they vector the two F-18 aircraft and they go to look at this thing. And long story short, after visually seeing this tic-tac looking object, roughly about the same length of a F-18 fuselage, performing in ways that we still can't replicate, bouncing around up and down.
So this is an intelligent technology.
This is absolutely, and it's responsive and reactive.
And it's not human.
It's not ours.
I'll tell you one thing. It's really interesting the fact that you hear that they create their own gravitational field around themselves, and that the craft is a living object. The craft itself is alive, and it's keyed to the pilot, and obviously going from 80 feet or 80,000 feet to 50 feet, he would just splatter, or making right-hand turns at, tens of thousands of miles an hour in an instant, right-hand turn, or any kind of left or right angle turn, splatter. Humans can't do that. The G-forces alone kill you. But it's still interesting, the fact that when you see them going from the air into the water and back out, it's like they didn't do anything. It's like there was nothing there. There's no kind of force pushing down on them to the water. They go water and back out into the air as if it was just nothing. And I've heard people talk about they have their own gravitational field around them, so technically not even flying in our space-time. That's one theory I've heard, but it's still interesting. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Hope you liked it, and I'll see you on the next one.
that we have possession of bodies?
Yes, yes.
We have is it multiple types? That we have possession of bodies?
Yes, yes.
We have is it multiple types of creatures, or?
Sir, I couldn't answer that. I can tell you anecdotally that it was discussed quite a bit when I was at the Pentagon. The problem is the supposed collection of these biological samples occurred before my time, in fact, before I was even born.
And was this part of the Lockheed Martin discussion, or was this the biologics is a completely separate?
Separate yet related.
Okay. Has anyone made contact?
Sir, I'm sorry, could you specify?
Has there been any, to your knowledge, any communication with a non-human life form?
So the term communication is a bit of a trick word because there's verbal communication like we're having now. The problem is you also have nonverbal communication. And so I would say definitively yes, but from a nonverbal meaning, when a Russian reconnaissance aircraft comes into U.S. airspace, we scramble 2 F-22s, and we are certainly communicating intent and capability. I think the same goes with this. We have these things that are being observed over controlled U.S. airspace, and they're not really doing a good job hiding themselves. They're making it pretty obvious they have the ability to even interfere with our nuclear equities and our nuclear readiness.
Is the United States government and our contractors, are they pulling technology from this? They're reverse engineering this?
Sir, as I previously stated, and please forgive me, I am not authorized to discuss specifics about crash retrievals. I signed documentation with the U.S. government. What I can say was, after a very thorough review process by the Pentagon, what I wrote about, and that was my limit, unfortunately, that I was given.
That was absolutely useless, but I'm wondering if he's just trying to sell his book, because he did come out with a book that I've read, and I'm wondering if he's trying to sell his book, because I know he's got DOPSR clearance. So DOPSR is when you have a secret clearance. DOPSR is it's an authority that mandates publications and reviews, and that's who he would have had to go through in order to be able to say any of the stuff that he's saying, has to go through that. That's the funny thing about whistleblowing. The only two avenues that you have if you want to become a whistleblower are both going back through your own government. That's why people go to like Julian Assange and all of these other sources to hide themselves and to release information, because in the U.S., when you're part of the U.S. government, your only two avenues are both U.S. government to whistleblow. So it's a bad idea. Aside from him, so him having that DOPSR clearance and them telling him what he's allowed to talk about and allowing him to come out and say all of this stuff, but still, he can only say very little. It's just, and then having a book at the same time that all of this starts, it's, I don't know. Let me know what you think. I'm still chewing on it a bit personally, but yeah, it's definitely interesting, but it also makes me think about his intent for a lot of this. Is this just his book? He wouldn't be on Joe Rogan and on all these podcasts if it weren't about his book, because the Pentagon didn't say, hey, go on Rogan. They would have said, definitely do not go on Joe Rogan or any podcast. Say this in a congressional hearing where it's scripted. We know what they're going to ask and what you're going to say. Other than that, don't do anything else. But because he has a book out, been all over the place.
This is the video that would shock the world and change it.
2004, November. The USS Nimitz carrier strike group were doing what they call workups off the coast of San Diego. And as they are doing this, there are two different radar arrays that are picking up these objects over the course of several days, dropping from 80,000 feet and within about a second or less, all of a sudden being 50 feet over the water and hovering and then popping back up again. So they vector the two F-18 aircraft, and they go to look at this thing. And long story short, after visually seeing this tic-tac looking object, roughly about the same length of a F-18 fuselage, performing in ways that we still can't replicate, bouncing around up and down.
So this is an intelligent technology.
This is absolutely, and it's responsive and reactive.
And it's not human.
It's not ours.
I'll tell you one thing. It's really interesting, the fact that you hear that they create their own gravitational field around themselves, and that the craft is a living object. The craft itself is alive, and it's keyed to the pilot, and obviously going from 80 feet or 80,000 feet to 50 feet. You would just splatter, or making right-hand turns at, tens of thousands of miles an hour in an instant, right-hand turn, or any kind of left or right angle turn, splatter. Humans can't do that. The G-forces alone kill you. But it's still interesting, the fact that when you see them going from the air into the water and back out, it's like they didn't do anything. It's like there was nothing there. There's no kind of force pushing down on them to the water. They go water and back out into the air as if it was just nothing. And I've heard people talk about they have their own gravitational field around them, so technically not even flying in our space-time. That's one theory I've heard, but it's still interesting. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Hope you liked it, and I'll see you on the next one.